Welcome back, CAPE students. I am Kelleen Ayton, and I'll be your teacher for this Communication Studies lesson. Let's get into it. So last week, students, we started looking at Module 1, Gathering and Processing Information, and we looked at primary and secondary sources, as well as how to evaluate sources. So what are we doing today? We will continue with Module 1, and based on the objectives from the CAPE Communication Studies Syllabus 2019, students are required to be able to determine the appropriateness of data collection methods and instruments, including the use of the internet as an electronic resource, as well as identify the characteristic formats, organizational features, and modes of expression of different genres and types of writing and speech. Therefore, our specific objectives for today include that at the end of the lesson, you students should be able to identify different methods of collecting data, discuss the different advantages and disadvantages of each method, identify different organizational strategies and language techniques, and identify a writer's tone. So before we go any further, students, let us define some key terms that you must know once you're engaging in research. What are some of these terms? So data, instrument, instrumentation. It is imperative that you understand what these terms mean. So data, what am I talking about? Data refers to the kinds of information researchers obtain on the subjects of their research. So this is the information we gather from our sample. Or they can be considered pieces of information that any particular situation gives to the observer or researcher. Instrument. What do I mean by an instrument? It is the device used to collect data, such as a questionnaire, an interview, or observation. And finally, instrumentation. It's the process of collecting data and involves the selection, design conditions under which the instruments will be administered. So now we are keen, we are clear on these definitions and these terms. So let's head right into methods of data collection. What is it that we use to get or gather our information from when we are doing a research? Now on this slide, students, we have three: interview, questionnaire, observation. And may I add, all these three are primary sources, and we discussed that last week. Then we have document review and internet, and these would be secondary sources. So those are our different methods of data collection. Now let us spend some time discussing each of these methods of data collection. We're going to be defining them. We're going to be looking at the advantages and disadvantages associated with each method. So right here, students, we have interviews. The picture to my immediate left shows you an interviewer and an interviewee, okay? So this is a one-to-one. However, on the right, we have, I would imagine, two interviewers, yes, and one interviewee. So this is what we call a panel. So we have more than one person asking questions in the interview. It is important, students, that we know that interviews are conducted face-to-face, over the telephone, or online. So we are accustomed to the face-to-face interviews. However, it is important to note some of them are done on the telephone, particularly if it's international, And thanks to COVID, when we are trying to limit our face-to-face interactions, we can do them online. So we could be using Zoom, for instance, Skype, Google Meet, name it. We can do an interview like that. So what exactly is an interview? It allows individuals to respond to a series of oral questions. And so, what are some of the limitations? What are some of the benefits that we can gain from using an interview to collect data? Let's start with the advantages. So, individuals can contribute their own views on an issue. The person you are interviewing, so the interviewee, that person shares their personal information or response to whatever is asked. There is greater flexibility for both interviewer and interviewee. So although as the interviewer, I may come with prescribed questions, it gives me room to add a little bit more based on what you, the interviewee, responds. Points can be explained, clarified, and corrected if any misinterpretation arises. So students, sometimes you're asked a question, you're not so clear about what it means. You can ask for clarification in an interview and vice versa. If the interviewer is not clear on what the interviewee responds, then clarification can be received. Another advantage of the interview is that a lot of information can be garnered from experienced interviewers. So if you know what you're doing, students, there's so much information that we can collect. And interviews can make relevant observations on sensitive information. What do I mean by that? If you ask the interviewee a particular question and he or she is a bit uncomfortable with what you're asking, then their facial expression, their body language will suggest to you, don't go any further along. And so by reading this non-verbal communication, students, you will know as the interviewer not to go any further along this path. On the other hand, let's talk about the disadvantages. Why is it not always the best method? It is open to bias and subjectivity. Remember I said the interviewee is sharing his or her personal information on what is asked. So it is open to bias, how he or she feels specifically about the issue. It may collect unnecessary and irrelevant details. You know, this is talking, and we can talk on and on and on. And so, sometimes too much is said, and some of what is said is irrelevant. It does not allow for anonymity. So guess what? I am seeing you, you are seeing me, and even if we are not seeing each other, we know each other's name. So that's a limitation, because when persons know who you are, then depending on what is being asked, the person may not always speak the truth. And this leads us into the final disadvantage. Because I can see you, because I know your name, things that are uncomfortable, you may not, the interviewee may not reflect the true thoughts or opinion. So that's our interview. Let's look at our questionnaires. So questionnaires can be could be self-administered, and they could be mail surveys. Let me differentiate each. So the mail, the questionnaire could travel via the post office, or it could be emailed to you, or it could be self-administered where I hand it over to you. Now, what are questionnaires? There are a series of questions which respondents complete on their own. And questionnaires tend to have rating scales. So you have a list from which you will select. And I just want to explain to you, students, that sometimes you should have completed a questionnaire sometime in your life already. So Questionnaires have what we call open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. What's the difference? As you can see on the screen, students, the open-ended questions, they provide lines for you to write. The closed-ended question, you get options for you to tick or shade, put an X depending on what the instructions say. What are the advantages of the questionnaire? And what are the disadvantages? So one benefits students from using a questionnaire, guess what? It is convenient for distributing to large numbers in a short time span to a wide geographical area. So if your sample is large, guess what? This is the best thing to use, method to use. Questionnaires can be completed at respondents' convenience and privacy. So whether it's mailed or I give you in person, you tend to be able to complete this questionnaire at your leisure and pleasure. Respondents can check personal records if memory fails. So they require my TRN number for argument's sake. This is not something that I know by heart. I can go home, go and search for that card, get the number, and fill it in. It facilitates quick reporting and analysis of data, particularly the closed-ended questions. You can do a tally quickly. And definitely, it guarantees anonymity because you are not normally required to put your name on a questionnaire, so persons tend to be more honest in their response. What are the disadvantages of the questionnaire? It limits the scope of asking probing questions. Students, remember what I showed you. So you just have a line or two if it is open-ended, and then the options for the closed-ended. So there's not room for much information to be gathered or asked. It is inflexible. The items tend to be forced choice. You must select from what is given. Usually limited in the kinds of information that they elicit. Remember now, we don't want to turn off the respondent by giving them something that looks like a book. So we have to limit the number of questions that are asked. They have short spaces for respondents. You have to keep it short and spicy. And it lowers response rate. It's a lower response rate than other methods. Guess why? Guess why that's so? Because many persons, they take it home and they can't be bothered when they get home, or they don't want to write. So this gets lost. They don't bother to fill it out. Let us move on to observation and take a good look at this picture. So these persons are out in the field, look like a swampy area, and we see some birds. They have their binoculars. They are looking. So what is the observation? Observation, the researcher seeks answers to questions by either participant or non-participant observation. May I clarify those words? So I spoke about participant and non-participant. If you're a participant observer, otherwise called overt, guess what? You are a part of the sample that you are viewing. So you're working with them, alongside them. If you are a non-participant, then guess what? The persons will not know that you're actually observing them. So, what are the advantages of observation and what are the disadvantages? Because you have to know them. For observation, one of the advantages is that it allows for collection of primary data in a natural setting. You remember the picture you just looked at? They were out in the field, right in the natural setting. Researchers are better able to appreciate and understand the factors that inform the behavior of the population being studied. As the observer students, if you are in the field, you can more readily understand and appreciate why certain things happen. It can give high return of data, and it can be an unobtrusive way to collect data if the researcher is taken as one of the group and is discrete in recording. So what that one means, students, if you're in a natural setting, you're observing, but the persons you're observing are not aware that you are an observer, they just think that you're working along. Then and there, you can get a lot of information from them. On the other hand, what are the disadvantages? The reactions of respondents may be misinterpreted. So as the observer, you think that this means X, when really and truly, it is Y. Important and relevant information may be missed. So, particularly if you are going as a lone soldier, you just have one pair of eyes, students. So, everything happening around you, you cannot all see it at the same time. So, some things will get left behind. Actions and behavior never remain static. Today, I'm in a very good mood. Tomorrow, I'm not. So things are not static, we change. Reactions may be altered if they're aware that they are being observed. So students, you can identify with this one. So your teacher is being assessed, and you see the head of department and maybe the principal enter the room. Of course, you're on your best behavior. So it's the same thing, students. If persons know that they are being observed, they will be so prim and proper. The observer can become distracted, lose focus, and miss relevant information. So you come to observe, but guess what? You are so interested in a particular thing that you forget that you're here to observe. And so things go haywire. You forget what is your focus. So that's the observation. Let's look at the document review. So remember I said document review, these are secondary sources. And as the word suggests, you are reviewing something that is already in existence. So what am I talking about? A book, a journal, a magazine, some article that was written, they are already in existence, and you are reviewing them for whatever reason or whatever your research topic is. What are a few advantages of document review? Valuable and intimate thoughts and motivations of the writer is gained, which may not have been possible in a survey, for argument's sake. Original documents are less subject to memory decay or distortions compared to accounts reconstructed from memory of an individual. And one weakness, one limitation of the document review, they may have deliberately biased perspective on the particular issue. And finally, students, for the methods of data collection is the internet. We are always on the internet. Now we know we are exposed to a plethora of information on the World Wide Web. But there are things that we need to be careful of, and of course there are benefits. So what are the benefits of using the internet? Definitely, a wealth of information is accessible. It is very easy to access. So students, once you have your data, you're good to go. Click and you're ready to access this information. It saves time. No longer, students, we have to get dressed, ask for a ride or take the taxi to go to the library, etc. It is right there, right on your bed, right in your house. You can access that information. And it is comparatively inexpensive. Yes, we have to pay pay for the data, but it is comparatively inexpensive means of accessing information. And what are the things we need to be cautious of as it relates to the internet? It provides a huge amount of information, thereby causing information overload. So it's a case you have too much information, sometimes we get confused. What to, where to? Anyone can publish on the web. Do I hear somebody saying Wikipedia? So anyone can publish on the web. We need to be cautious. I spoke to you last week about how to evaluate a source. Remember that. without passing the content through an editor. So be careful what you choose and where you get it from. Theft of personal information and misuse of this information. You know our business can be out there, so we have to be cautious of that. All right? And it is not arranged according to system and no index format compared to if you were to go in the library, things would be a little bit more organized. And so students, these are our methods of data collection: the interviews, the observation, the questionnaires, document review, and the internet. All right, so I said we were also going to look at organizational strategies and language techniques. But just before I go there, let's do a quick activity. So, a group of science students from Courtleigh High is conducting research into the extent of the air pollution in their community, which has resulted in a number of residents having respiratory illnesses. All right, you understand the context? So, which of the following would be the best tool? Notice the word in all caps, best tool for collecting data in this research. Is it the internet? Is it observation? Is it questionnaires? Is it an interview? Which one would be best? Community, respiratory conditions. So definitely questionnaires. Remember, questionnaire can reach a large sample. Number 2, which of the following is not an advantage of the questionnaire? It's an easy method of collecting data for a large number of persons. Does not allow for anonymity. Allows for easy collation of information gathered. Questions can be answered at one's convenience. And the answer is, which one is not the advantage? Definitely B. The best source for data on the air pollution in the community, is it the students, members of the community, doctors and nurses, science textbooks? Which one would be the best source? Do I hear letter C? Right. All right, and our final question. Why would the students not be able to use this research to generalize about air pollution in their country? The respondents lied about the pollution. The research was only conducted in one community. The students were not trained researchers. The students did not experience the air pollution themselves. So we cannot generalize about air pollution in the country because we are only focusing, we only got information about a specific community. So let's go to the other half of today's lesson, organizational strategies and language techniques. Are you familiar with these terms? No, you may not be. It's still early in the term. So I'm sensitizing you to these very early. Now, look at this question. What steps or pattern of organization do you follow to get your room clean? Something that we don't like doing sometimes. It could be students, some of you spread your bed first, then you arrange things properly, then you sweep, then you wipe. For others, you may do the sweeping first, then you do the wiping, then the arranging, then the spreading. So all of us, we have different ways or methods or steps to get our space organized. Why am I telling you this or asking you this? Similarly, for writers, they have a specific way or options in which they can organize their writing based on what it is that they want to convey and who they're conveying the information to. So let us first look at organizational strategies. The mouse letter. I am a mouse. It is not often that a mouse writes letters, but I feel that on behalf of my many brothers and sisters, I must thank you for the food you so kindly leave for us on the floor of your classroom every day. The food is absolutely great. What I especially commend you for are the generous daily helpings of ham, sausage, chicken, potato chips, cheese, bread, and cake. Such mouth-watering delights. I must say that you are so different from those mean and selfish students who inhabited this room last year. I still remember how for days on end, my brothers, my sisters, and I would roam all over the room, hoping for a fragment or morsel, but finding none. We would have starved to death if we had not gone elsewhere. But that difficult period is over, thank goodness. My cousins, the rats, have obviously heard the good news, and a few of them sit regularly with us at the banquet table. Rumor has it that hordes of them are on their way here as well. But we are not worried. There's enough for all, thanks to your thoughtfulness and generosity. A fat mouse. Wow, students. What a letter that this fat mouse wrote. So, listen to my questions. My first question is, what does the mouse really want to tell the student? Truly and eternally grateful for the wide selection, the widespread of food left in abundance daily. My second question, students, is, what does the writer want to tell the students? Huh? This is not the rat now, you know, or the mouse. This is the writer. What does the writer want to tell the students? That, guess what? You are nasty students. And how does the author organize his information? Think about it, students. I know I read a lot, but can you think of the way he organized? So, cause and effect. So the cause is the litter left behind daily. The effect is all of this forms food for the rodents. And contrast, do you recall the rat saying that these present students of Form 1 are quite different from those from last year? And another organizational strategy used was description. We got a detailed description of what this food, what is at the banquet table, okay? So these are examples of organizational strategies. So can I provide you now, students, with a definition for organizational strategies? They refer to how the writing is organized and how it is structured. So you're looking at the writing in general, overall, how it is organized, how it is structured. Strategies are general and speak to the overall pattern of the writing. And I've provided you with 3 already, and I want to provide some more. So comparison and contrast, description, cause and effect, problem and solution. So an issue comes up, how do we solve it? Spatial or time order, we are talking from past to present or present to past. Sequencing, how we order. And definition, so we are providing meaning. It could be division and classification, you are grouping. Paragraphing, did you know that authors can use short paragraphs for a particular effect as opposed to long paragraphs? So these can be organizational strategies, and these are just some examples. So, I discussed organizational strategies with you. What then are language techniques? So this is my definition. So techniques, on the other hand, are the smaller details. So it would be like the techniques are a subset of the strategy. So we find the techniques within the strategy. They are specific and they are therefore found within the strategies themselves. What am I talking about? You're still not clear. Guess what? When we look in the paragraphs, we may see, for instance, rhetorical questions. Emotive words, they appeal to our emotions. Figurative devices or metaphor, simile or irony or sarcasm, name it. You may also find imagery, so this appeals to our senses. Statistics, here we're talking about figures. It could be slangs, it could be jargon, and remember jargon is language that is unique to a particular discipline. So, we have examples of language techniques. What were some of the techniques used in the letter? So, definitely we saw examples. Do you agree with me? So remember, we had description as the strategy, but what is the technique we found in it? Examples. What I especially commend you for are the generous helpings. What are the examples now of the food? The ham, the sausage, the chicken, the potato chips, the cheese, the bread, and the cake. These are the techniques, and they justify examples. We have emotive language. Now, guess what? I must say that you are so different from those mean and selfish, strong words. You can hear the disgust, the dislike for those mean students. Humor. Of course, how many of you laughed? I did. My cousins the rats have obviously heard the good news, and a few of them sit what? Regularly at the banquet table. Can you imagine that, students? This rat bossy bad. All right. So, students, there are a few things that I want to wrap up with. Organizational strategies and language techniques. Where will this be tested? This will be found on paper 2, what we call the long paper, what we call the essay paper. And remember, this is under module 1. Now, be prepared, students. We don't know what form, if you're going to be getting back your regular papers or it will be all multiple choice, but just in case we are sticking to the norm, you will find this. This is going to be the first question on paper 2. That would be tested on paper 2. So make sure you can clearly differentiate between strategies from techniques. Too often, students are not clear what they are and they answer one for the other. It's going to be wrong. Make sure you know the difference between strategies from techniques. My second point there says be prepared to identify at least 2 strategies and 2 techniques from the stimulus. Students, know them. Be able to understand. Don't come with any preconceived strategy and technique and any question, any stimulus you get, it must be this or it must be that. Know them. Be able to differentiate strategies from techniques and be able to identify at least 2 strategies and 2 techniques. Go prepared. You should also be able to identify the writer's tone. Sometimes that is asked within that question. Do you remember what a writer's tone is? So it is how the person feels about his or her, the subject matter that he or she is writing about. So students, work with me. What are the writer's tone in the poem? But before you answer that question, let's look at some possible words that could explain a writer's tone. Casual, ironic, critical, celebratory, pitiful, satirical, sarcastic. Talk to me, guys. What would be the writer's tone? Definitely sarcastic, because when you're sarcastic, you're meaning the opposite of what you say. So it sounds as if it's all grand. Yes, for the rats. But really, the writer wants to say, you are very nasty. You need to have a clean environment. So for the writer, that would be one of sarcasm. Be able to justify students' reliability, credibility, and validity. I did that last week, in last week's lesson. Go back, look over. So if you get a stimulus, how can you, what are the tips for identifying any of these from what is provided on that exam paper? Check to see if an author's name is there. Check to see the publication details, students. What do I mean by that? The name of the article, book, magazine, journal, the date, see if they provide the page number, the year of publication. All of that will make you trust what you're seeing. Check to see if there's any reference to reputable persons. So Dr. So-and-so, depending on if that doctorate is in the area in which whatever the stimulus is about, they are aligned to that. Check for organizations, reputable organizations. We can use that to justify these. Check to see if there's empirical data and if this empirical data is provided from reputable sources. Finally, students, I want you to P on your paper. Yes, P-E-E. What do I mean by that? When you're discussing your body paragraphs, students, I implore you, you will only get maximum marks if you follow what I'm saying. Simply highlighting the strategy or the technique will not do you justice. How do you construct your body paragraphs quickly? You start with your topic sentence, and your topic sentence must identify, make reference to the point, that is the strategy or the technique that you're about to discuss. That's the P in P, the point. And that the point is your strategy or your technique. After you have that as your topic sentence, you're going to provide an example. So don't tell me there's rhetorical question. Don't tell me that there's statistical data unless you can provide evidence to convince me, the marker, that this is indeed so. So you're going to provide an example. Remember your quotation marks. You're taking it as is from the stimulus. And finally, students, the explanation. You will explain why the writer chose this particular strategy or technique in order, why he chose that, and the effect it has in bringing across his or her message. So, just to recap, we looked at methods of data collection, organizational strategies and language techniques, writer's tone, justification for reliability, validity, and credibility. Remember to P on your paper. We've come to the end of another great lesson.